Hello, and welcome to Point of View, where we share the stories of your favorite Pittsburgh legends from their point of view. It's a beautiful day here in the Center for Media Innovation because we have Mr. McFeely himself, David Newell. That's right, the delivery man from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is in our studio. Find out more about the man behind Speedy Delivery, his rise from public relations to acting, and what life was like on set. Let's break it all down on POV. Thanks for streaming with us. I'm Natalea Hillen, joined by Anthony Durzo and Kalliyan Winder. David Newell is a lifelong Yinzer, known for his role as the always cheerful Mr. McFeely on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He also worked in the public relations department for Fred Rogers Production Company. A documentary on David's life called Speedy Delivery was released in 2008, 2 months after the show's 40th anniversary. Thank you so much for being here, David.
Well, thank you for having me on POV, right?
Yes.
I'm on Hyde Park POV, right?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
You are a Pittsburgh icon. I just want to kind of get to know your background and where are you from? Where did this all start?
I'm from Pittsburgh originally.
Mm-hmm.
I was born and raised in Pittsburgh. And when I was in my teens, I moved to Hawaii, of all places.
Wow.
And first to Los Angeles, and then to Hawaii, because I always wanted to see Hawaii. Now, this is a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Hawaii had just become a state. Wow. And the day I arrived in Hawaii, they were filming Blue Hawaii with Elvis Presley at the airport.
Wow.
And that's how, that movie's at least 30, 40 years old, so that's how long it's been. But I'm a Pittsburgher, went to Los Angeles, Hawaii, worked in theater in Hawaii for a while, worked in some theater in Los Angeles, but I decided, I had to go to the Army. You had to be drafted at that point. So I came back to Pittsburgh, did my Army stint, and then out of nowhere, I got a job at WQED, the local public television station. And that's how I got started.
That's amazing.
So I thought, oh yes, I'll have a job for 1 year. And that was 1967, 68. And here I am talking to you in 2023 now, 2023. Right?
Uh-huh.
So I've been associated with the program that many years.
Wow.
And it was a lifetime job, and it was worth every moment. I loved, and I still love talking to you, the third or fourth generation who knows of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So here I am. So ask any questions you like. I've been around for a while.
Yeah. So you actually talk about that interaction that you had with Fred Rogers before you took the job in the 2018 documentary, Won't You Be My Neighbor?
Yes.
You said that Mr. Rogers came to you about playing Mr. McFeely and you kind of took the job on the spot. What was that conversation like? Did you feel nervous or were you confident?
That's a good question. And I think you're nervous in any interview, but I knew who Fred was, but I had never met him. But I knew the people who were with him, his producers and directors. I had known them from being a volunteer at WQED, but I never met Fred. And I walked into the room, it was a table. I was on one side, Fred was on the other with the director and producer. And instantly he made you feel at home. It wasn't a grilling of, let's get all your credits. And it was Fred. And we instantly hit it off. And he was not only my boss for all those years, but also a good friend. And I'll show you, and I told this a little earlier what we did before, but I had an emergency gallbladder operation. And I went to the hospital. My wife had to go. She knew I was okay because it's a pretty standard operation, but she had to go and take our son school or pick him up. At any rate, when I came out of the anesthesia in the recovery room, who do I see but Fred? He had come to make sure everything was okay. In fact, I didn't know he had stayed through the operation. He came earlier, stayed for whatever duration, 4 hours, came to the recovery room, and I came to, and he said, "David, it's Fred. Everything went well, and Nan had to go. It's my wife's name, Nan, but she'll be back, and I have to go now, but everything is fine." And that's who he is. It's not an act. He's genuinely was a wonderful person. And what you saw on television was real. You know, it's tough looking at that red light on the camera, making a connection with the people at home. That camera is tough. He managed to soften that somehow, and his own personality went through that camera. And people producing television for children, for adults, have a responsibility to do the best they can in that holy ground space. And he certainly did with children, with Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and many other Sesame Streets the same way.
Very important.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yes. Along with being best friends with Fred and seeing him have that connection with the camera, how could you describe a day on set?
Fred was very disciplined. And a day on set, he wanted to get, because you're paying for every minute, he was very methodical. He had a teleprompter, and he wrote his own material. And what he did first, he'd write the scripts. They would type them up at the time, then put them on a teleprompter. And when he came in, he knew this Mr. Rogers song, "Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood." He would sing that, but then when the show started, it was teleprompted. But we did that last. We always did the Neighborhood of Make-Believe first. They were taped in segments, and we had about 10 of them. We'd do them, and then we'd do the openings and closings. So the day on the set of the openings, Fred would always go swimming. He loved to swim, and he would get up in the morning at 5 o'clock. This is his ritual. This is what he prepared for the set. He would get up, he would go through correspondence, he would read a passage to himself out of the Bible. He read the Bible through, would start over again, read it again. He was a Presbyterian minister also. Then he would go for a swim, an hour swim, very, very disciplined, and then come to the studio, and he'd be ready to face that, because making television, even a children's program, is tough. It's oh, we didn't get that, we'll do it again. And it was frustrating for him when there would be a glitch, not with he excused people for getting lines, but when there was a technical glitch, that's what got him. It was difficult, more difficult in the days on the set, but Fred was so disciplined, his swim got him through the day. If he didn't get a swim, he was cranky. And I said this so many times before, but there's a saying, when you pick your job or your career, make sure you pick something you love, because you'll never work a day in your life. And I've never worked a day in my life, because I just loved being a part of something that was helping children. And here I am.
Yep.
So you were just touching on, like, you loved, you not only were doing a TV show, but your purpose was to educate children. And your character was reliable and constantly cheerful. How did you discover that that's the way that you wanted Mr. McFeely to come to life?
Well, I think when Fred interviewed me, I think he took my natural persona, I guess, and he said, I think he would make a good delivery man to himself, because he didn't ask me to be Mr. McFeely until the end of the interview. I got the job, the technical part of it, doing the, but at the very end, he said, before you leave, I have written a part of a delivery man into the new season of Scripps, and I want you to play it. And I think maybe my manner, my enthusiasm for what he was about to do, all of that worked. He saw something, and he never said what that something was, but we clicked as friends and as fellow performers. So here I am, still delivering.
You still are.
So we were talking before, your acting career dates back to the 60s. What was your experience like on a public television set? And have you noticed any industry changes throughout the years?
Oh, yeah, a lot of industry changes. And I think it comes in the technical end of it, where things now you can, sometimes if you make a mistake, you can just keep going on and, okay, we'll do that in editing. A lot of that has really helped the process. What was the other question about?
Have you seen any other industry changes throughout the years, maybe like from an on-camera perspective?
You mean as an actor?
As an actor.
Not so much as an actor, because you have to really know your lines. But if you do make a mistake, you have that option of cut. We'll do that in post. Continue. Start with. So that has helped. But I think the real challenge of an actor being an actor is not so much television or movies, but it's the proof of an actor. The toughest, I think, is where you're in a play, a 2-hour play. You're on the stage for 2 hours, and you better know your lines.
Yeah.
Television gives you a little break, and so does me. You can stop and cut and edit. In live theater, you're on there and you're on your own. No one's there to help you. And that has never changed.
Right.
No, and I don't think from perspective of acting, it hasn't changed much. You've got to know your lines, you've got to deliver.
Right.
What can help you is the technology can make you just pick up where you left off instead of starting all over again. Right. So that I've seen, that's been a blessing.
Yes, I bet.
When working with Fred Rogers Productions and even like touring the U.S. as Mr. McFeely in multiple like documentaries, even during the show, you met a lot of people. And what were some of those interactions like with people that grew up watching your show? Do you have any special moments or any special gifts that you've gotten that really like you remember?
Special guests?
Yeah, gifts or people that you've met who watched the show.
There's so many stories. One good example is Guam, the island of Guam. There's a public television station in Guam. And the person who ran the station called me one day and said, do you think you could come to Guam and meet the children in schools all around the island? And what an experience that was. These were children who were island children, some from the Philippines, and it was a mixture of Samoa and all these different island, beautiful children, and they watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and Sesame Street. And I went around to all these schools, and it was quite an experience. Here you are, what's the distance? 5,000 miles away from where we make the program, and they knew the program, and they knew who Mr. McFeely was. And that made me feel so good, because we were reaching beyond the 50 states or whatever state, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's a territory of
Yes.
Guam, I believe. Anyhow, that was quite an experience. I've never forgotten those children. The minute that I walked in the schoolroom, and there were about 100 of them in each school, and they all knew the neighborhood. And that's the power of television too. And it's so rewarding to have what you've done. Because look, we're in the studio, and we're doing a program what seems like for 4 walls. But eventually, a lot of people are going to see our conversation. You don't realize that at the moment.
Yeah.
And that's the same way it is making the neighborhood. 4 walls, they get out, and all those kids know who you are and get the message. That's the most important thing.
What did you have to do to prep for Miss Rogers' Neighborhood?
Well, first, you mean overall or individually?
You can talk about individually your role, what you had to do each week.
What I had to do. Well, first of all, my job was twofold. I was in charge for about 10 years of getting all the props and costumes and locating maybe some potential performers. And I had to make sure all the costumes, the props were all ready for each show. That was a full-time job. Plus, when there was a script with Mr. McFeely in it, I then had to get the set ready. It's for props. I didn't have to put it up. Make sure the props were there, then go to the dressing room and get into my McFeely costume. So it kept me busy. And the days I was not Mr. McFeely, I could relax a little bit because I just had to worry about the props. But generally speaking, I was on probably, I would say 75% of the programs over the years. It was such a wonderful experience, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
So in 2008, actually, a documentary about you called Speedy Delivery was released. Can you talk about how that came about and what the experience was like making that film for you?
Yes, it came about because there was his name was Paul Germain, and he was in the Hines School at CMU. It was sort of a master's program in television that he was going through. And somewhere I met him at an event. He was having the event, and we just talked. And I said, if you ever want to come to QED and you're a television major, come over. And about 6 months later, he showed up. And he said, I have an idea. I'd like to make a 15-minute documentary for my class. That was a requirement. And it turned out to be a 75-minute documentary. But he made it on a shoestring. I think he had a budget of $3,000 for doing this. And he had fellow students helping him out of CMU's Heinz School of the Arts. I can't remember the exact name, but that's where he was going to school for his master's. And that's how it came about. But he would go to a typical day with me when I went. We were in Baltimore, as a matter of fact.
Oh yeah, I did read about that.
We came to Baltimore because I had to be at the Baltimore Public Television Station for an event that they were having that I always already committed to. And he said, well, where are you going on your travels? We'll go with you. So Baltimore was one, your hometown, right?
Yes, sir.
And then he would go to other places. We went to Idlewild Park where I was working, meeting children. And so he'd follow me around with fellow students, and we would get this wonderful footage. He probably has outtakes, so it would be another documentary. But it was so much fun doing. And yes, it's called Speedy Delivery, and it's available online by going to speedydeliverymovie.com.
Fun.
So that was a lot of fun. But, and they interviewed my sons in it too. I have 3 kids, but my daughter lived in LA and he couldn't afford the trip out to New York. But my sons at the time were living in Pittsburgh, and they were in college at the time, and interviewed them too. And my wife. And Mrs. Rogers, Fred's wife. Fred had passed away at that point, but some of my coworkers, and I don't know if you've seen it or not. Have you? You have seen it. Okay. Well, anyhow, it was a lot of fun to do, and it's sort of a definitive chronicle of my career in a way. There's elements of it that. This is what I've done over the years, or maybe it's just a glimpse at a certain time in my career, but it gives you an idea of what I did on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, if that makes sense.
It does. From documentaries to cable with Fred Rogers, and the audience grew all the way to Guam, apparently. Didn't you?
And beyond.
And beyond. Did you have any fears being Mr. McFeely? I know you have a background in acting, but as the audience grew, more eyes were on you. Were there any challenges?
Challenges in what way? Challenges for
acting wise, your job as PR there. Were there any challenges as more viewers kept viewing the show?
Yes. What the challenge was, as when we started out, and PR wise at least, there were 3 commercial stations and a public station independent, 5 stations. Now there are 500 places to view something. Then it was much easier to get the word out when you had just 5 stations, because there wasn't so many places that you only had to publicize a certain amount. Now I don't know how they do it. When they want to publicize a certain show, it's a challenge. But I would publicize internally too, by going around to all of the public stations as best I could, because each one of them could promote Mr. Rogers on the local level, and you get viewers that way too. And why make a TV program if no one's going to watch? So you might as well go out and say, here's what we do. We feel we have a good product. I'm here to promote and tell you about it. And that was sort of my job. And by the way, I'm Mr. McFeely.
So this year marked the 20th anniversary of the passing of Fred Rogers. So I wanted to ask you, looking back, what are some of the things that you miss most about not only your former colleague, but your friend?
Oh, his sense of humor. People didn't realize that he had a terrific sense of humor. And people have asked me a question like that before, but he was still alive at the time when somebody asked me a question somewhere, and he saw it, and he said, thank you so much for saying that I have a good sense of humor, because he does. And it comes out in some of the puppets, King Friday and Lady Elaine. Some of that is pure Fred, but he's also a good appreciator. If he enjoyed performers, especially his passion was music. And he was a good friend with Yo-Yo Ma, the cellist. He's a classical cellist, Yo-Yo Ma. We had him on the program, but he's the premier cellist in the world practically. And Yo-Yo was on the program, and he loved Yo-Yo's music because he too, Fred was a trained musician, piano. So he respected all of the musicians we had. We had a lot of music on. That was his passion, music. He wrote his own music too in the songs. We never used a song that was not written by him for the most part. There might have been one or two. Happy Birthday we used one time. But that was his passion, the music in the program. Was that, I'm drifting off, but did I answer your question?
Yeah, his sense of humor is what you miss most about him.
Yes, that's what and he loved his sense. He appreciated other people's sense of humor too.
Yeah.
Oh, and you wouldn't think for early on at Christmas time, I would give him a Christmas gift. This was when his children were young, and I don't think you even know who these people are, but there's a comedy team called Laurel and Hardy. You've ever heard of them?
I've heard of that name.
Laurel, it's two Laurel and Hardy, and they were big in the 20s and 30s. They're very funny comedy. If you would see a picture, you would say, oh yes, I know who they are. Anyhow, they had made a series of shorts that were shown in theaters in the 30s. And I gave him one every Christmas so he and his family could enjoy it. And they were slapsticky too, sometimes pie in the face. And he was not a slapstick appreciator. He thought that throwing a pie in someone's face is demeaning. Yes, it is, but at the same time, he appreciated their skill. Yeah, it's hard to explain who they are if someday Google them.
Okay.
Laurel and Hardy,
Yes.
and you have to give them a chance. They were they were a huge comedy team in the 20s and 30s.
Okay.
And so I gave him the gift of it was on film at the time for Christmas.
Yeah.
So and he appreciated it.
That's very nice.
So last and final question.
Yes.
So I know you were talking about music, you sang a lot whenever you were Mr. McFeely.
Yeah.
Did you know how to ride a bike? I know you rode a bike a lot. Did you know how to ride a bike before the show, or did you learn there?
No, I never. That's true. Everybody, all of my friends, we lived on a steep hill when I grew up. And there was no place to ride a bike. And if there were, you'd be on a busy street, and I wasn't allowed to ride a bike. I never learned how to ride a two-wheeler until I was on the neighborhood. I had never ridden one. And to this day, I've never ridden a bike outside very much.
Wow, that's
hilarious. But I did it in the studio. And the first time I did it, one of the first programs we did, X the Owl's Tree, and I had to stop on a two-wheeler, give something to X, and then say bye, see you around the neighborhood, then drive around the tree and exit. And I drove around and ran right into and the camera, I could hear the cameraman laughing, and the camera would start shaking. You could see on the monitor, and they said, David, just walk it around. But so I never learned now I can ride a bike, not well, but I can ride a bike, but I learned on the neighborhood. Then they said, oh, he's never going to do it right. We'll get him so they got me one of those adult tricycles with a delivery. So actually it was better because you could carry things in it, and there was a bell on it, and it looked more like a delivery service. So, and that, by the way, is in the Heinz History Center. And if your viewers don't know, they can visit Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood again by going to the Heinz History Center, because that's where the set is. The original Mr. Rogers set is on permanent display at the Heinz History Center. It's just right down here past the Strip District.
Yeah.
And that's where my bike is and some of the puppets.
Wow.
And so it's a destination for a lot of
Yeah.
people, and they get a lot of people from out of town coming just to see the Mr. Rogers set. And his sweaters, some of the sweaters are there.
Yeah.
Aw,
So it's
that's amazing.
so it's in Pittsburgh where it should be, where the program started.
Right.
Yep.
But as you said, it goes to, and we were in the Philippines too, and through Canada, and now the program is reaching out even beyond there because there's a lot of streaming, so you can still get Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood online, pbskids.org, and you can see about 300 programs that you maybe saw or your parents saw when they were growing up. So they're still with us. It's like Wizard of Oz. It's still around and it still resonates today.
It does.
You can watch Wizard of Oz and it still works,
Mhm.
as does, I think, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Mhm.
And the values that he talks about apply to every generation.
Yes.
You know, what he talked about, many things, you know, love and caring and gentleness and respect for each other. All of that it goes on forever.
Mhm.
And that's what makes Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood
Yeah.
so amazing and special, not just to Pittsburgh, but to everywhere around the world.
And
Right.
I think you're right. And that,
Mhm.
thank you for that.
Of
That's
course.
I'm
Of course. No,
glad.
thank you.
That I'm glad that was a wonderful. It does. So you get it. See, some people don't see it as minutely as you did, but but it's true. That's who he was. He brought to it. It was him, not an actor, but it was
him.
Mhm.
it was inside of who he was.
Right.
There was kindness and respect is what Fred Rogers was, and I'd love to do it all over again.
And not just him, but you also, like you're very charismatic and you're natural with your role as Mr. McFeely, and it shows today in our interview. Like you're awesome. So
Well,
thank you so
thank
much
you.
for joining
Yeah,
us.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
Now,
Thank you.
before we sign off, I'm
Yeah.
going to count to 3, and we're all going to say speedy delivery.
Okay.
So and we're going to look at that camera.
Okay.
Here we go. I'm going to count. Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Speedy delivery.
Bye.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you, Anthony and Kalliyan. And you will be back for our photo segment. This segment is called Photo of You, where we scour the internet and our guests' social media pages and hope to answer what was going on from their point of view in that moment. David, are you ready to go for this?
Well, I hope so.
Oh, you're ready. I know you're ready. All right, so photo number 1, in which our team has dubbed even puppets have a wardrobe. So what do you remember from this moment?
Oh, that is me the first year of our taping, 1967-68. I was in charge of getting all the puppets in their clothes. And I even had a woman who made puppet clothes for me. And we had, so a lot of those clothes were made specifically for the puppets on our program.
Mhm.
And that is me going through them all and sorting out the costumes. And I was in
Wow.
charge of not only the costumes that the actors wore, but the costumes the puppets wore and the props that the people used.
Wow.
So that was me on the studio floor going through the box of...
Super organized. Wow. All right, we're going to move on to photo number 2.
Okay.
Church bells ringing.
Oh my goodness, that is the wedding of Mr. and Mrs. McFeely.
Oh.
Now, that's not my real wife. Her name is Betsy Natus, and she played on the program Mrs. McFeely. And that we did a recreation of our wedding, in a church in Oakmont, Pennsylvania. It was a church that was no longer being used, and we did it in one day. And my wife was in the wedding procession. She was the minister was an actor, and his daughter played the flower girl.
Oh,
So
wow.
and my wife was sitting in the audience too. So
That's hilarious.
and we did it in one day, and that was the
Oh.
wedding of the McFeelys. It was a flashback. I came with a film and said, "Mr. Rogers, I'd like to show you my wedding," and then they flashed back to that.
That's amazing. How
So,
cute.
boy, where'd you find all these?
We found them. We're going to move on to photo number 3,
Okay.
a blast from the past.
Okay. Oh my goodness. Oh, that's oh my goodness, their walkie-talkies.
Uh-huh.
And that was almost the latest in electronic equipment at that time.
That's
Because this is
crazy.
going back, what? Oh, this is going back 30 years.
Mhm.
And now they look like they're oil lamps, you know?
It's insane to see the the technological advancements
and
from when
now-
you guys were recording to now.
And now with our cell phones, you can watch a movie if you want to. Who would want to on your cell phone? You can watch Gone with the Wind on your cell phone, and everything is in there. Just think what's in a computer. The world is in there.
I know. And
It's
I grew up with, I mean, I guess the iPod Nano was kind of the first thing I was introduced
Yes.
from the Apple, but I mean, like I grew up with Apple products pretty much, and then the tablets and phones
But
and all that.
see, that gave you the leg up because we are struggling to catch up. You know, we had none of that. You at least got in on the
Yep.
ground floor. And
Yes.
so that's an advantage because you have to know all that
Yeah.
now. You know, I often said that, you know, when people are can't read, they're illiterate. You know, in a way, I feel like I'm illiterate with the modern technology because I can hardly work on my iPad. And you feel, you know, and people who can't read must feel the same way.
I know. It's hard.
And if you're computer illiterate in this day and age, you like it or not, we have to deal with it.
Yep. It's insane.
So now another
We're
photo.
going to move on to the next photo.
Okay.
Who is a good dog?
Oh my goodness! Where did you get this? That is that is Bear.
Oh, Bear.
And Bear passed away about this time last year.
I'm sorry.
And I am too. But he was a good dog. We had 2 Mastiffs, and he was the second. English Mastiffs are big dogs, and they weigh about 200, but they're sweet dogs. And if you ever want to get a dog and you have a room for it, look for an English Mastiff because they're big, but they're gentle. They call them gentle giants.
Gentle giants.
But that was
so
Bear.
cute.
And that was in our backyard.
Aw. We're going to move on to our last photo.
Okay.
Correct as usual.
Oh my goodness. That was at the celebration. That was the Mr. Rogers neighborhood postage stamp. When they came to the WQED studios, this postal service, and they unveiled the Mr. Rogers stamp, and they blew it up, and that's a blow-up version of the stamp.
Wow.
And the stamp was available for about a year. You could go in but I still get people sending me letters with the Mr. Rogers stamp.
Wow,
And
that's so
sometimes they reissue them too.
cute.
But a lot of people went in and bought pages of them and keep them. You know, you can go
Because
in.
it's like a souvenir. That's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
something that's
exactly.
very, like, that's special.
Yeah,
Like, that's
but to have a postage stamp. And so anyhow, that picture was taken at WQED when the Postal Service came and unveiled the Mr. Rogers stamp. The perfect place to do it, right in the studio where he made all the Mr. Rogers programs.
that's
So-
amazing.
So I have 1 sheet left, and I want to keep them.
Aw. Well, thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh,
You were
thank you.
amazing to have. It was amazing hearing about Mr. Rogers and like your journey to how you got there and how it has influenced and made you who you are today.
Well,
So thank
it
you
was,
so much.
boy, I'd do it again. And I get up some days and I miss going into the studio. But on the other hand, I have all those memories and I want to put them in a book.
You
So-
should.
And I want to do that. It's harder, it's easier said than done. But I will. I will.
That's an awesome goal to have.
And I can say I was on this great program at Point Park.
Yeah. Thank you so much, David.
Oh, thank you.
David currently resides in the Pittsburgh suburb of O'Hara Township, and we look forward to seeing the legacy of Mr. McFeely live on. And thank you for streaming with us. Our show is produced here at the CMI with thanks from our partners at UView Television and the Point Park News Service. I'm Natalea Hillen, and we hope to see you next time on POV.